Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk about a franchise of movies. Really, it's more than a franchise. They call it a universe, a film universe. That may sound like something dorky the Marvel studio ran with, but it'll be what we're calling it. What we're going to be talking about is the Conjuring universe. I'm not going to be doing my normal video where I look at a franchise of movies or a movie and talk about it in depth, recapping it, and giving my opinion on it, because the Conjuring universe has 8 films. That video would be like 2 hours long and boring. So what we're going to be doing instead is ranking all of the Conjuring movies. Well, the entire Conjuring universe. I have to keep saying that because there's Annabelle, The Nun, then the Conjuring. Ugh. But the real point of the video is to rank out the movies and see if the entire Conjuring universe deserves the kind of acclaim that it's gotten. The franchise as a whole, or my bad, universe as a whole, has grossed over $2 billion. Let's get this straight. I am bewildered by this. 2 billion buckaroos, 2 billion smackaroonies, and $2 billion doos on a franchise this doo-doo is insane. Though not only has the franchise itself made over $2 billion, some of the top earning films in the Conjuring universe, I'm going to be swapping those words around the entire time, by the way, franchise universe, film universe. As I was getting at, some of the biggest movies in this universe are amongst the worst of all of them, especially the highest grossing one. They're not only the worst in the universe, no, they're some of the worst big budget horror films I've ever seen. Anyway, let's get started with the absolute worst film in the Conjuring series. One of the worst movies I've probably ever seen in my life. I did not plan on watching a lot of the movies in the Conjuring universe. You could say I might be a psychic, because I knew these movies would be bad. Especially this one. Coming in at number 8, The Nun. The Nun is a very interesting movie. Not for any particular good reason. I just absolutely love the fact that this movie somehow is hanging on to like a 5 out of 10 on IMDb when it does not deserve anywhere near that. Also, this movie made like $366 million, and I have no clue how they got audiences to come see this movie. When I first saw the trailers, I knew it was going to be terrible, but some people are just a sucker for punishment, I guess. Not only did I know this movie was going to be bad, but I've had other people in my family who had seen this movie telling me, hey, this movie really sucks. So I went in with very low expectations, and I was still blown away by how bad it was. This takes place in Romania at an abbey, and we see pretty early on how ridiculous the movie's going to be. The movie starts off with a demon nun chasing down 2 nuns. In a way, I guess. They found an artifact. One of the nuns ends up jumping out of a window. I can't say the word. In order to not let the nun demon take over her body and escape this abbey. News of this nun reaches the Vatican, them knowing like, hey, a nun just did away with herself at an abbey in Romania. They do have some history at this abbey, and later on throughout the movie we learn more about it. Honestly, didn't need to be told, but here we are. With this news, they end up sending this special priest out and this special nun lady who isn't quite yet a nun yet. I don't know the point of that. When they both arrive to Romania, they go and meet the guy that found this nun. He's some fella that delivers stuff to the abbey, and lets them in on the knowledge that, hey, this place is cursed, and the townsfolk all think it's cursed. Okay, just a little bit of build-up. This character is going to be in 2 different movies. I might as well explain a little bit of his backstory. He's like a French guy that moved to Romania for some reason. Or, my bad. He's French-Canadian, in his own words, is not as bad as a French person. So Frenchie goes and takes the 2 of them off to this abbey, and the movie begins with all the horrors of this haunted abbey. Coming into this, you notice that the shots in this movie aren't bad, but the only good parts of this movie are really just like the B-roll of them flying drones over top of this castle and getting pretty nature shots. That's the best parts of this movie, is the nature shots around this castle. Those were my favorite parts. When they end up arriving at this castle, they have to stay the night for some reason. The French fella goes home and says he'll come and pick them up in a couple days. Then we get the most confusing, plotless, aimless, dumbest movie ever. Let's talk about why, if I can even explain it. I'm not going to explain the plot of this movie. It is nonsensical. The entire time I was watching this movie, I was sort of sitting there reacting to it like, huh? What? What's happening? I had to go on Google and to the reviews of this movie and figure out if I was too stupid to follow this movie. I genuinely thought I might have been dumb. Shortly after the Frenchie guy leaves, he gets attacked by a zombie nun, which is the movie showing its intentions fairly quickly. There's zombie nuns. That's one of the main bad guys in this movie. is zombie nuns, and they never get close to harming anyone. The bar is set very low after that, though. It was at this point I was thinking, wow, this movie really can't end quick enough. Anyway, two of the characters, the priest and the nun chick, they go to sleep for the night. Then the point of the movie where I was just like, where the priest gets lured outside by the demon nun or something, pretending to be someone in his past. He goes out there chasing it around, and then a snake, which I don't like snakes, so this was actually a scary part of the movie for me, because fuck snakes. I hate snakes. It pushes him into a grave, and he's just buried underground. Like, the movie takes the camera off, pans it back, and there's just dirt covering it. His whole name's now on the tombstone above it. Then the woman, Farmiga, inside, the nun chick, she gets awoken by the demon nun too, but she's like, where's the priest at, going around screaming his name, like, where are you, father, whatever the hell your name is, as if it's important. The character doesn't matter, this whole movie doesn't matter. She might get attacked by a zombie nun here, I'm not entirely certain. I can't recall. I tried to forget about this movie. He then starts hearing bells ringing. Earlier in the movie, they have these bells tied to all the graves in the graveyard. Having a hard time. They all start ringing, and she just immediately assumes it's him in one of the graves ringing the bell. Which, I mean, it was him. But why would that be your first thought? There's a giant castle that you're inside of, and then there's a giant yard around the castle, and you instantly think that's him, not the wind or something, when it's windy and foggy.
Father!
She then does some magic where she's able to focus in on the sound and figures out exactly what grave he's in. Digs him out. Okay, this doesn't make any sense. While she's digging him out, there's even a zombie nun attacking him inside the casket. I don't know how all of that happened, but it happened. And none of it makes any sense. None of it's scary. If it weren't for the zombie nun attacking the guy earlier, this is where the movie lost me. Inside the grave that she dug him out of, they find some books which explain the demon that's there. Then the Farmiga chick runs around interacting with these nuns. By the way, none of the nuns were real. They're like all hallucinating all these people that are inside there. Everyone in the abbey's dead. And that goes on for like 40 or 50 minutes. Maybe longer. This movie's very long. For no reason. Priest guy, while he's off, he's learning about this demon named Valak, which we learned in one of the earlier movies is the demon that's the nun. Turns out this castle was controlled by some necromancer bad guy who worshipped the devil and ended up spawning a portal to hell. Well, then you see some cool crusaders, maybe the Knights Templar, I don't know. They come in and they use an artifact with the blood of Jesus Christ in it to shut the portal to hell. But oh no, World War II happened hundreds of years later, and the bombs that dropped on Romania opened up the portal to hell! Now this demon's like stuck in there. It's trying to find a way out. And they gotta close the portal to hell. A bunch of bull happens, and then they end up going down to the tombs, the catacombs of this abbey, and it turns almost into an Indiana Jones-esque adventure film for a minute, until we get our final showdown, where Frenchie shows back up, by the way. He's there. He's like, why aren't you ready to come home, my man? I don't know how to do his voice. I can't do a French accent. So they all battle with the nun. It's the most ridiculously bad-looking fight. It's not scary. None of it's scary. The demon nun looks stupid. It's probably the worst horror villain. I don't know what else you call it. Evil spirit that's probably ever been made. You think that the Farmiga chick's gonna be killed, but oh, guess what? Guess what? That artifact that looks broken, like the blood of Jesus, is all over the water that they're in, because for some reason it's flooding. I don't know why. No, it's in her mouth, and she spits it at the nun, and then Valak, the demon nun, is vanished, vanquished, and the portal's closed. Oh, but not so fast. When they go and leave, you see the Frenchie guy is possessed by a demon. And that was the movie, The Nun. Nonsensical, zero plot. The only plot throughout the entire movie is the fact that there's a demon nun and they need to vanquish it. That's the whole thing. And everything that happens in the middle didn't need to happen, or it was just there to be confusing and boring. There might have been one jump scare that kind of worked, but anytime there was bad that was going to happen throughout this movie, there's almost no music throughout the movie, so when something bad's going to happen, the music kicks on, which is a big sin in horror films, so you know something's gonna happen. Plus, the nun doesn't look scary, it just looks stupid. Like Pennywise. If you're afraid of clowns, I guess. Like if you're afraid of nuns, then this movie will get you. If you're afraid of nuns for some reason, maybe you were abused as a child. Not gonna ask. But this would be your movie. Or if you're like a 12-year-old who is watching their first horror film away from their parents at a movie theater with their friends, it's probably a killer movie. I wrote down in my notes, holy f***, how do you even explain that movie? That's a genuine 0 out of 10. Genuine 0, wow. That is what I wrote about this movie, and I stand by that. I will give that movie this. I never thought I'd ever see the things that happen in this movie happen in a movie, so one of a kind. But as far as comparing it to the other Conjuring movies, this is fucking bad. It's dumb. Terrible. How this movie made $366 million is probably going to be humanity's biggest question. More than the meaning of life or how the universe was created or anything else. How the f did The Nun make $366 million? Moving on. Now that I've completely bitched about the first Nun movie, you're probably wondering what comes in at our number 7 spot on this list, and to no one's surprise, The Nun 2. Yeah, the Nun movies are not good, but somehow The Nun 2 ends up being a better film than The Nun. I'm not even really going to try to explain why, but I think the first movie took me by such surprise and was so confusing with its lack of plot that I can't even rate it. It wasn't a movie to me, it was just, no, never again. This movie at least was something. This is the one that I least wanted to watch after that too. I saved it for last, you know, the best for last. I'm just gonna jump into the movie, I guess. The Nun 2. This movie made like $200 million, released in 2023. What a fun story. A sequel to the worst movie in the franchise. The Nun 2 shows you what it wants to be pretty early on when we get a very boring intro that takes a very long time until a random priest ends up being thrown into the air and lit on fire by the demon nun chick who got out in the first movie. I'm not going to really be able to explain this movie because I tried to watch it 3 times, and 2 of the times I tried to watch this movie, I fell asleep during the movie, which isn't a great sign because I never do that. There was nothing to write about while watching this movie because the plot is blah. And this one too. You see a lot more of the nun though, so again, if you're afraid of nuns, this movie's probably your kind of movie. After a very long time of introducing us to the Farmiga chick again, probably takes 40 minutes, we go and see the Frenchy guy from the first movie who's being possessed. Turns out, after another hour of this movie, that he's trying to track down some artifact, and the nuns inside of him using him to get this artifact. I don't know why, I kind of skipped through this movie. I know I wouldn't be able to make it all the way through. No way. Somehow the Frenchy guy's working at this school, that's where the artifact's at, and you're like following the nun chick and this other nun girl, tracking down, trying to figure out what the nun wants, and blah 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 blah, none of it matters. Oh, this leads to a showdown between the nun, which is like the last 10 minutes of the movie. None of that matters. I don't know if I should have put it in 7th place, because it's probably worse than the first movie. I just wanted to say f you to the nun. So, until we get to this little showdown, which is, I don't know how you can call this horror. The nun, it'll open its mouth and it has pointy teeth and orange eyes and there's blood in its mouth. It's dumb. Holy f. Whoever wrote these movies and directed them, just stop. Please. Quit. If there's one lesson to take away from this entire video, especially the guy that directed the first movie, what are you doing? You've made a lot of money, so they're gonna keep offering you movies, but stop, please, stop. Really scraping the bottom of the barrel with this movie. They end up taking the nun chick out by the end of the movie, though. The Farmiga chick gets put in the air and she's like on fire, but then somehow they're like, oh, there was this one person who was like a saint or something, and like not even fire could burn them, and I guess they're like saying that she's her or something. I don't know, man. This is just dumb. They take the nun out. That's the whole point of the story, isn't it? Figuring out that the nun wants this artifact for some reason so that they can be strong and powerful demon and take over the world, or they gotta stop it. The whole movie just leading up to this point is a plot that I could care less about, and bottom of the barrel scares that are only there to try to give purpose to this god-awful script. This movie probably should have been scrapped on the editing floor, but let's just move on from it. They saved the day But there is more sequel bait, but it's post-credit sequel bait. Let's hope that the next Conjuring movie doesn't have the nun in it, or, no bueno. I'll probably watch the next Conjuring movie, though. You know, if James Wan actually directs that one, I'd give it a chance, I suppose. Who knew the world needed more haunted house horror by James Wan? Favorite part about The Nun, too? There was a goat guy that attacked people for like 10 seconds in the movie, and that's a lot scarier than a nun. The goat man. I liked that, but that was like only one 10-second scene down a hallway. Overall, I'm gonna give this another like 0 out of 10. I'd just like to get the 2 Nun movies out of the way quickly because no good. Moving on from starting my video off with the 2 worst movies in the whole fucking world. Let's move on to number 6. Probably a bit of a surprise. It took me a while to think about how I wanted to rank these movies in order, from worst to best, and somehow one of the mainline Conjuring movies comes in before the Annabelle films. Number 6, The Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do It. This movie is the only The Conjuring movie to not be directed by James Wan. What's the fella's name? Gary Doberman? Don't know how to pronounce it. You need to figure something out, bud, because you cannot write a movie. This movie starts off like any Catholic possession horror film with really stupid exorcism of a kid. There is a pretty funny scene inside of this, though, where the priest that's exorcising the kid just gets smacked in the head by a glass plate. Got a decent laugh out of me. I really liked that part of the movie, which sounds like blasphemy, I know, but he's an actor, so who cares? After the head to the plate moment, though, the movie goes downhill pretty quickly and never manages to recover from that. A lot of really dumb contorting and quick camera movements. It's just exorcisms, you know, flying in the air, demon movements, CGI, priest preaching. That is hard to say. I think the biggest problem with this film is probably that it is a mainline Conjuring movie. So my hopes were a bit higher for this movie. I definitely thought coming into this video that I'd rate these movies like The Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do It, The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring, in that order for like the top 3, but it didn't exactly turn out that way. Anyway, at the exorcism, the film's premise becomes apparent when one of the characters tells the demon kid like, "Oh, leave him alone, just take me over. No, just take me, leave the kid alone.
Leave him alone and take me. Take me."
And then he gets possessed instead, but the kid's okay. There's a problem though, a slight problem. You know, flying around everywhere and it's really loud. It's like there's a hurricane happening inside of this home. So Ed Warren is the only one that manages to hear what's happening. And oh no, he has a heart attack during this, which is not good. So Ed ends up getting taken to the hospital. So he's not able to tell like Lorraine and them, hey, that guy's gonna be possessed for a little while. How no one else was able to see this happen when they were all looking at him saying that, I don't know. Everyone missed it though. Even the psychic. Lorraine Warren is supposed to be a psychic. She didn't know. The movie goes on to show the character that took the demon out of the boy and put it in himself is being all funky and possessed-like until Lorraine Warren gets told by Ed that that guy's possessed. She tries to call and warn them like, hey, some bad going to happen. They aren't able to stop it in time though, and the fella ends up stabbing his buddy to death.
Hey! Now you just stay right there, okay? Don't move.
I think I hurt someone.
The only real horror in this movie took place in this beginning part of the film where the guy was beginning to show signs of possession, but it was all done with really bad jump scares. After these, though, the movie isn't much of a horror film. I'd probably consider this movie to be more of a mystery crime thriller. I don't know. It's definitely more of a mystery of the Warrens trying to solve how the hell this guy's possessed, because Lorraine Warren's unable to sense any demonic possession with the guy. This is explained right after this when the Warrens concoct a plan to have this guy use as defense for the murder that he's being charged with, that he was under the effect of demonic possession. With that, they go and search the home that the fella lived at and find this witch totem underneath the house that I guess is used to curse people. So then the whole movie takes place with the guy being possessed and about to be charged with murder, and the Warrens trying to discover who the hell made this witching totem and put a curse on this guy. This middle chunk of the movie is probably the weakest part of the movie, With Ed and Lorraine Warren going over to a different jurisdiction where another crime like this happened, due to her psychic powers, she's able to solve this murder, and the police give them their documents to try to help them with knowledge to figure out this guy's court case or something. While they're trying to figure out what happened in this other murder, Lorraine Warren's able to use the dead body of the people involved and almost psychically transport herself to the person that's doing this curse, this witchcraft lady.
How are you doing this?
God has shown you to me. She knows who we are.
She turns out to be the big villain, the big bad guy in this movie. She's kind of creepy looking, a lot more creepy looking than the nun, which is crazy because this is just a normal woman. A normal witchy lady that's just in a dark witchy place who manages to be more unsettling than the nun. While she's doing her psychic transportation thing, though, she notices that not only is she transporting and seeing this satanic lady, no, the satanic lady can see her. I don't exactly know what the going on here. It's psychic mumbo jumbo bullshit. The psychic lady saw her doing that. She knows who they are. So Ed and Lorraine Warren solve the crime and head back home. But oh no, guess what? The satanic lady went and put a satanic curse on them inside their house. So Ed Warren's like becoming possessed and stuff. Lorraine goes and tries to track down a fella who knows about it. In a twisted turn of events, though, the guy that is helping them throughout the movie, he's tied into all this because his daughter is the satanic lady. Oh no! And Ed and Lorraine Warren have to fight through these underground tunnels with the satanic lady, where we get one of the most easily foreseen moments in any of the Conjuring movies, where Ed's like all possessed and trying to attack Lorraine with a sledgehammer and ends up chasing her down to the witch's table where she does the curses, and he smashes it instead of hitting Lorraine. You can see it from a mile away. Plus, there was no tension throughout any of this. Although it took like 40 or 50 minutes, you know that these are the main characters of the story, and this is all based on like true stuff. Like, I don't know how else you could, like, it all supposedly happened in real life, I'll give them that. But you know that Ed and Lorraine Warren don't die here, and they're just fine. So there's no tension. After smashing the lady's stuff, though, everything's over. Everything's fine. That's pretty much how the movie ties up, other than they go to that guy's court case, and he only gets manslaughter charges for stabbing that guy to death. But Ed and Lorraine Warren saved the day and stopped the witch's curse. I don't know why this movie was made or why this story had to be told. I honestly would have preferred, like, the Warrens going around trying to figure out how this guy's possessed and trying to prove it in court, and it actually just be like a court drama thriller. That would have been a lot more interesting. Because it wasn't a horror movie in total, and a witch lady and psychic just don't do it for me. It's better than a demonic nun, but I think I'd rather go and watch a movie about a doll. Which means coming in at number 5. We've already made it to the 5th movie. Annabelle made it to the doll. If I would have went into this thinking that the doll would have been at number 5, I would have told you you're a liar. There's no way the doll is the 5th best movie in the entire franchise. But it is. It is! The doll is better than a mainline Conjuring movie. As I said earlier in the movie, though, I'd only seen the first 2 Conjuring films, none of the other ones, so I really didn't know what to expect. Let's just say I had a lot of preconceived notions about all these movies before I watched them, too. I used to talk on the Annabelle movies every time I saw a trailer for one. Oh, those movies are going to be terrible. They're going to be really bad. And don't get me wrong, Annabelle's pretty bad. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's not necessarily a good thing if you're like, hey, my movie's better than The Nun, because every movie should be better than The Nun. So Annabelle's the second movie to come out in this cinematic universe, and it's the first movie in this cinematic universe to not be directed by James Wan. Though I think he did produce and write or direct every movie in the Conjuring universe, so his hands are definitely at least touching parts of all of these movies. Annabelle takes place in the 1960s with a couple and their baby on the way. Due to the baby being on the way, the girl is, or the mom, the wife, I don't know her name, is decorating the baby's room, and the dad guy brings in a doll. He's like, I know you've been looking for this forever, and oh no, it's Annabelle. That's not the weird part of the movie. The weird part of the movie is seeing this couple living in the 1960s in California, and just how different the 1960s were for California. comparative to today. The streets were clean, the houses were in a pretty nice state. It was honestly kind of scary to see. Anyway, just when you think that the doll is going to start doing creepy things, no. Instead, one night when the couple goes to sleep, they end up hearing a scream from next door. The neighbors next door end up getting murdered by this weird cult of people. Turns out their daughter was a weirdo and went to some satanic cult, decided to kill her parents, sacrifice them to the devil. During this, the dude ends up going next door to figure out what the hell's going on. And while he's next door, the woman gets attacked by these people who also came into their home. The guy comes back and fights them off for a while before the police come in and just kill these people. Just shoot them dead. Well, bad news. The Annabelle doll is in the lady's hands. The bad lady, who's also named Annabelle, as she dies. After this, the lady obviously has PTSD and shit, and she's kind of injured, so she's not necessarily stuck in bed, but she's expected to lay around a bit. With just having two people being murdered in your home who were trying to murder you, they're both kind of on high alert too, but then, you know, some spooky things start happening throughout the house. This all leads up fairly slowly. There are some nice moments of tension and just genuine scary moments throughout this. The doll isn't necessarily scary, but whoever directed this movie kind of knew what to do with horror, unlike the previous three. It starts off slow though, with like a sewing machine going off when it's not supposed to, and ultimately leads up to the doll trying to burn the house down while the woman's home alone. After the house burns down and Annabelle doll is presumed missing, they end up moving to an apartment. They seem pretty happy about this though, because the house wasn't a great place. I mean, your neighbors got murdered. The people that murdered your neighbors tried to kill you, then they died in the home, so it's probably a good thing. A fresh start. If this introduction to Annabelle wasn't already sort of boring with the old house, it gets worse in the next part of the movie where they're inside the apartment and the haunting begins. Annabelle isn't introduced back into the home until they unpack one of the boxes from their house and the doll's in there. The woman, for whatever reason's like, yeah, let's just keep it. It's fine. It's okay. Even though the doll was doing all sorts of creepy shit before. The entirety of the film then devolves into spooky shit happening with ghosties and ghoulies going around the house, and the woman trying to discover what the hell's happening. She goes to a bookstore or library and reads a book about demons, of course. This happens in every movie like this. Coming up, and coming up, and coming up, and coming up, and coming up. Oh. This all leads up to us realizing that some satanic cult is involved and the doll is probably possessed by a demon. We don't really meet this demon until the woman goes down to a storage facility underneath their apartment. As much as I can make fun of this black-looking demon thing being just kind of dumb looking, this part of the movie is kind of scary. The woman keeps trying to close the elevator and go back up, but it don't work. Sometime after the demon moment downstairs, the family realizes, hey, this is pretty bad, and they call a priest over. The priest ends up saying, yeah, the doll's haunted. I'm going to take it with me and hold it in the church until we can do an exorcism on a doll. But things don't go according to plan, because when he goes and takes it to the church, he ends up dying or getting hurt in the hospital. Who could have called that coming? Doll's going to do bad stuff. The dad fella in the movie, he's a doctor. So whenever he's at work, he sees the priest that he just sent to the church with the doll in the hospital all up. He's like, oh, bud, this ain't good. And it's just really just stupid from here, like disgustingly so. The rest of the movie is just the woman mom fighting a demon until this lady that she's been in contact, who works at a bookstore down the street, throwing herself out of the building to sacrifice herself with the demon doll, but leaves the family alone, and it's a happy ending, I suppose. On a serious note, I don't know why the movie decided to end in a way that doesn't make sense. That's becoming a real pattern in these movies. I mean, yeah, this woman's been helping her discover what the hell's happening, and she's the only person that believed her about being haunted. But why did she just randomly throw herself out of a building to protect this family that she doesn't really know? It's explained that she lost her daughter earlier in the movie, but maybe she doesn't have anything to live for, and being a saint, a real good guy, by offering herself an eternity in hell to save this family. I don't know. Movie's an absolute waste of time, but there are okay little uses of horror that are kind of effective. And it's not the worst movie I've seen in this series. Of course, the movie ends with another, like, sequel bait, like all these movies are going to try to do, where the doll shows up at a second-hand store, and somebody comes in and is like, "Ooh, what's this doll? I like this." So, you know, the doll's gonna keep passing hands. Annabelle was not a good movie. It's not really nothing to talk about. It's just kind of a boring demonic possession movie where the actors and actresses they did okay. It wasn't so bad that it was like offensively bad or terrible. It was just kind of slow and pointless. The setting of the 1960s is always cool. I like seeing movies set in the past. It's interesting what people do for the set and makeup and clothing. There's only so many times you can see a doll rocking in a rocking chair while no one is there to push it, that you're just like, yeah, I've had enough of this though. All right, with those movies out of the way, we finally start to enter territory of movies that aren't like terrible. Coming in fourth place in the Conjuring universe is Annabelle Comes Home. Expectations were not high at this point because this is the very last movie in the Annabelle series, but the doll was never as bad as The Nun, so really after watching The Nun, it was like I got injected with a whole lot of anything that's not The Nun. Oh, a sigh of relief. Annabelle Comes Home starts off with Ed and Lorraine Warren going and meeting people that are in possession of Annabelle. We see the Warrens go on a car ride, meaning to take their doll back to their house, when they have car trouble on the way, and we get a bit of a creepy foray into them breaking down beside a graveyard and learn that Annabelle has this power to be a conduit of other spirits around. We see all this because Lorraine Warren's a psychic, and she's like, oh god, that's a lot of ghosts and ghoulies. This is all utterly pointless other than to show that, though, because they easily make it home. Once home, they end up calling a priest, and them and the priest do some sort of little blessing to put the doll inside of a box. It has glass from a church's window or some shit to keep the demon at bay. And they put it in their little room full of possessed and cursed objects. The movie then doesn't follow the Warrens like you'd expect it to, and instead follows their daughter and her babysitter. So the Warrens are going off on some vacation or trip, probably to be on TV or whatever the hell the Warrens did. So they leave the daughter alone with the babysitter. This is where I'd like to talk about why I think this movie isn't as bad as the first Annabelle movie or some of the other movies in this franchise. I don't think that why I like this movie puts it above the others that we're going to talk about, but the characters in this film actually are some of the best in the series in my opinion, because it makes the movie more of like just a fun horror film than any of the others have attempted to be. The characters in the movie are, as I said, the Warren's daughter, who throughout the movie we learn that she also has some sort of psychic abilities and is sensitive to all that. Sensitive. Then the babysitter, I don't know who plays this woman, but she's like a blonde high school girl. She's not too bad. She's interesting. Then we have her friend who's kind of a troublemaker. We learn later on that her father died, so that's why she's a troublemaker. And then the kid next door who has a crush on the babysitter, and the babysitter has a crush on him. They're all home alone for the night, and Judy's birthday's coming up, so the babysitter's trying to do a nice little thing where she bakes her a cake. Her friend, who I cannot for the life of me remember her name, she ends up giving Judy a present, being roller skates. What is that what they're called? Roller skates? So the babysitter and Judy go out and walk. Go out and skate so she can try them out, leaving the babysitter's friend at the Warrens' house alone. Now, everyone in this town kind of knows that the Warrens are ghost hunters or whatever. This girl concocts a plan of, hey, I'm going to go into the Warrens' room where they keep all these objects and snoop around a little bit. After searching around for a while, she manages to find the key to the room and goes in. Just as you'd think, this doesn't turn out too well. So after being nosy and digging around where she's not supposed to be in a room full of haunted and cursed objects, she decides to let the haunted doll, which has warning signs and is locked in a box and is obviously pointed out to be the most haunted object in the room, which is a conduit for all the other spirits. She lets it out of the box like an idiot, and when she leaves, because the babysitter and Judy comes home and she's not supposed to be in there, she leaves the doll out of the box. Now, what does a doll do that's in a room full of cursed and haunted objects that is a conduit and can kind of empower these? Well, all hell breaks loose. It's at this point of the movie where it actually kind of slows down and doesn't work as well as I'd hope it to. The characters don't realize what she's done. There's little bitty haunting moments where creepy happening throughout the house, but none of the characters really admit to what's going on. The babysitter ends up hearing weird noises throughout the house. There's objects that are meant to be cursed objects in the room that are making their way out of that room, stuff like that. It's not until later that night where things really go a bit haywire. I don't know if I should shit on this movie or praise it for it just being fun because of what they do, though. I feel like the director of this movie just tried to take all these possible haunted objects that could be in the Warrens' home and show off the spirits of all of them, because that night, everything they've talked about throughout the movie starts attacking them. You have this weird samurai suit or this haunted dress that would cause the bride to become possessed or whatever. Like, it all starts attacking them pretty much all at once. Does it feel like a bad episode of Hulu Into the Dark or some other anthology show? Yeah, but is it entertaining? Watching all these different types of ghosts attack these people, or these three girls, and seeing how they managed to survive throughout the night was pretty fun. There were really slow moments, especially leading up to them realizing that going down, but I can't expect a third movie in the Annabelle series to not have its schlocky and bad moments. This movie also does something that I think every bad horror film should try to do, and that is just lean into the entertainment and comedy that if you can, because we get moments like where a hellhound has been released from this, and the kid next door that has a crush on the babysitter comes over trying to serenade or whatever, gets attacked by the wolf, and he of course has no clue what's going on. So it's silly watching this character's reaction to this and him hiding in the chicken pen outside. This movie doesn't so much feel like an Annabelle movie though, which is honestly kind of a good thing. Don't get me wrong, the movie's full of a bunch of horror tropes and it's not really trying to tell anything original, but the actresses are all pretty fun to watch try to deal with all these different little horror objects, so I think this movie came at the right time where I'd watched so many movies that felt tiring, and this just felt different, so I put it this high in the list. In the end, though, the characters managed to get Annabelle back in the box, and the Warrens come home, and Judy has a nice birthday where a bunch of people show up. It's a nice little happy ending. I honestly didn't expect much originality from the movie. I mean, it's titled Annabelle Comes Home, and the guy that wrote The Nun and a bunch of other bad Conjuring movies wrote and directed this. He was trying to have a fun time, and I gotta admit, I fell for it. It was pretty fun. It's just a silly little horror film that probably could have been made for TV, to be completely honest. This definitely isn't the worst. I'd give it an honest, 5 out of 10. I definitely wouldn't recommend this movie to people. Be like, hey, you want to watch a good horror movie? Go watch Annabelle Comes Home. Much better than the first Annabelle movie. With that movie out of the way, we head into our third spot in the list. I guess we start calling things the third best movie in the franchise. This one's going to be a little controversial because everyone puts this movie in the top 2 of the Conjuring universe. There is an Annabelle movie I liked more than this movie. Barely, but I did like it a little bit more. Coming in our third spot, The Conjuring 2. This, like the first The Conjuring movie, which we haven't talked about yet, is just a mainline Conjuring film following Ed and Lorraine Warren going to some possessed person or object or house and trying to save the people involved. This takes a bit of a different route than the first Conjuring movie or The Devil Made Me Do It, in that there is a bit of mystery involved in if the people who are experiencing this demonic possession are telling the truth or not. This movie feels like it has a much longer runtime than the first The Conjuring movie, which is why I'm putting it in at the third spot. So let's talk about it. The Conjuring 2 starts off with a little callback to an Amityville horror situation. This is where we meet the character that I hate the most in this series, when Lorraine Warren comes in contact with the nun who makes an appearance throughout this movie. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. That's probably why I put this movie at 3, because I can't stand the nun. Oh, how much that bitch can taint things. Because overall, this movie's not a bad horror film. It's not good. It's not great. not bad. Instead of taking place in America like all the other movies, this film never mind, I take that back. The Nun took place in Romania. God damn it. Forget about the movie every time. Using the term nun and god damn it in the same sentence also feel a bit sad, but it takes place in England. Yay. So this family, they don't have a father in their life. They're pretty low class, low class. I think that's more of a insult. They're lower class in England, kind of poor, and there's a mom and several rowdy children. The children start to experience all sorts of scary, haunting things, which leads to the Warrens being introduced. The first hour or so of this movie is the family experiencing all this haunting there's spooky moments, definitely, and the horror is there. I mean, it's a James Wan movie. It'd be hard to have a movie that doesn't have decent, scary scenes in it if James Wan's producing it or directing it. I think the only movie that isn't scary in his entire career, I'm looking at Malignant. That movie was just pretty dumb, but it's not a bad movie. It's dumb and funny. After a while of being haunted by this demon, the family ends up having a really bad night where really hits the fan, and they run next door. The police get called, and they come into the house, which points out to the fact that, yeah, bad shit's happening, and even the police see it happen.
Have you two been playing with this? Taking turns scaring the wits out of each other? Not you! Big bloody mouse.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that.
After even the police see this happen, of course it hits the media. Now that the media is involved, you see the part where I said that this is kind of a mystery, where there are skeptics talking about this. All these people come into the home and try to see if the little girl is telling the truth. The skeptics, which I think happened in real life at the time with this case, think that it's just the kids in the house pretending that they're being haunted in order to get attention because they're poor and they don't got a daddy or whatever. When the Warrens get involved, they are pretty much there to prove that this haunting is happening, like they did in the first movie, which we haven't got to. This part of the movie is actually more boring than the beginning, where the haunting was happening when the Warrens get there. The Warrens are obviously seeing that bad things are happening, and they honestly, by gut feeling, think that this is a possession, and there's a demon involved. But the problem is Lorraine Warren can't sense it or whatever. So after a good amount of time, the Warrens and the skeptic that's there end up being fooled because the demon pretty much tells the little girl that it's possessing, like, hey, you're gonna make it look like this is all fake, so they all leave, or I'm gonna kill your family. She does just that, and while the Warrens are on their way out of England, Ed Warren decides to look back at the evidence they have and realizes, oh, this is real, and they rush back to the house. But guess what? In the time that it took them, like an hour to leave and come back, things are going real rough. The Warrens get there and fight their way through the house. They manage to confront this demon, who turns out to be the fucking nun. They hold a cross up to it and say some and manage to vanquish it. For the time being. I hope forever.
Your name gives me dominion over you, demon. And of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I condemn you back to
hell! The house was completely destroyed, but the little girl ends up surviving this demonic possession, and the family's okay. There are some things I want to talk about this movie, though, and I don't want to go on and on, like, telling them in order. But there are some genuinely, like, freaky moments that I actually like inside this movie. There are several moments in the first half where the demon's messing around with the kids, where there are some really just good ideas for scary, tense moments. When the little boy goes out of his room and notices that this little fire truck toy that he has gets pushed out of this little tent that he has in the hallway. I like that. There was even a good scary scene in which the nun was involved. Lorraine Warren is going into this office, and you see the shadow kind of coming around the wall up to this picture that's painted by Ed Warren of the nun's face that I thought was cool. It ends pretty stupid, though, with the nun just kind of grabbing the painting and pushing it out at Lorraine Warren, but the ending, like every movie in this franchise, doesn't live up to what you hope, and the fighting off of the demon is just kind of the lowest point of this movie. On the other hand, though, there are moments that are meant to be scary that just turn out to be unintentionally funny and bad.
crooked bell, and thus his crooked soul spiraled into a crooked hell.
Anyway, The Conjuring 2, not a bad movie. It makes me wonder how you can have some movies in this franchise that aren't bad. I'd give this movie maybe like a 5.5, 6 out of 10, which is not bad. It makes me wonder how movies came out in this franchise that were so terribly bad, like The Nun and The Nun 2. I don't know how that happens in the same franchise. I don't get it. After The Conjuring 2, though, is where the controversy ends, because there's not going to be an Annabelle movie put in first place. Coming in at our number 2 spot, the second best movie in the Conjuring universe is Annabelle Creation. I want to explain why I put this movie so high, because it almost feels like a sin. This movie, throughout the entire film, all it does, the story is terrible. Everything's bad about it, but it knows how to be scary. And it is by far the scariest movie in this entire series, to me at least. It's just super intense throughout it. All it is just scare, 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 scare. And I'm not talking about jump scares. There is just scary, intense scene after scary, intense scene the entire movie through. I ended up like comparing it inside my notes that it felt like Lights Out, which is another like average horror movie that I've seen, in that it was just constantly trying to be scary. Well, I figured out why it reminded me of Lights Out when I saw that the director of Lights Out directed this movie. Now, the writer of this movie is Gary Doberman, probably, and he sucks, so of course the writing's gonna be bad in this movie. But the director, and boy does it show you that directors are important, which is why I started giving credit to James Wan while writing this. Although it's not something that's genuinely super scary, I wouldn't say this is the scariest movie I've ever seen. It was pretty freaky. And I like that. And if you know how to be scary when you're a horror movie, you're going to be rated higher than other movies. Now, as you can tell from the title, Annabelle Creation, this movie is a prequel to the Annabelle films, giving us an origin story to the Annabelle doll. Now, if you had it in your bingo card for this video that the movie called Annabelle Creation, being a prequel of Annabelle, would begin with the creation of the doll itself, then go ahead and mark that one down. So anyway, the movie begins with a doll maker fella living out somewhere. Him, his wife, and his daughter. Well, this guy's making dolls that look a lot like Annabelle. It was this point of the movie that was actually kind of boring until the family stops off like because of a flat tire or something, and some asshole was driving way too fast on a dirt road in like the 1930s or whenever the this movie is supposed to take place, and ends up hitting the daughter, killing her. It's not just the guy who hit her's fault, though. I figure even back then, kids would be smart enough to look both ways before crossing the road. It's after this that the movie jumps 12 years into the future, and we see a group of kids who are a part of an orphanage going on a bus to this guy's house. I guess for whatever reason, he decided to turn his home into an orphanage for all these kids, so I don't know why. Niceness of his heart, I guess it's a good idea. They say later on it was to repent for what they do. Allows this doll to get possessed, but yeah. Pretty early on with all these new girls that are all orphans living in the house, some pretty spooky stuff happens. It's where one of the little girls who has polio, which is just used for more of the horror aspects of this movie, she ends up going into the room of the little girl that is dead, their old dead daughter. Kind of lured into there, which is supposed to be locked. It's stated pretty clearly early in the movie that this door is to remain locked at all times. She goes in, over to the closet, and opens it up, and there's the doll, which is locked into this closet in a pretty scary way. There are Bible pages as wallpaper throughout the room, and a bunch of crosses everywhere. So yeah, you probably shouldn't have opened that door. It's with this opening that allows Annabelle to haunt the home and everything up. There's some pretty dumb transitions throughout this movie, and just overall really slow pace throughout the beginning. There are scary moments, like when the little girl enters the room or the other little girl goes in there with her, that work really well, but in between those, there's not much that I really care about. As I said, the story of this movie was written by the same guy that wrote The Nun, so I can't expect much from it. I find a lot of these moments like this to, although have kind of bad payoff, but they were pretty unsettling. It was 4 a.m. when I was watching this movie. alone that could explain for why I had chills for quite a bit of this movie. So pretty much the entire movie from here on just takes place with two of these little girls who are sleeping in a different room than the others, experiencing a lot of freaky stuff due to the Annabelle doll, up until the little girl with polio gets fiercely attacked by this demon and thrown into nowhere.
Your soul.
All to fall and not be able to walk at all anymore. Now that she's bound to a wheelchair, she ends up being attacked by the demon, whatever, and gets possessed herself. The next part of the movie is everyone else in this house realizing, oh, the doll is out and things are going bad.
She knows she wasn't supposed to, but she found this doll and...
What doll?
In the white dress.
That's impossible. That doll was hidden away.
My sunshine away.
All the girls end up coming back to the house and finding the dude who owns it dead, and the doll and the little girl with polio just start attacking everyone. We get some pretty fun moments especially, and moments that make me laugh, like when one of the little girls tries to toss Annabelle down a well.
Linda, what are you doing?
Doll, it's hurting Janice and it killed Mr. Mullins. I'm getting rid of it.
This all leads up to us getting an explanation of how this occurred, how the doll got possessed, where the woman of the house tells them that her and her husband were pretty sad after losing their daughter, as one would be, and decided to just ask out for anything to bring her back to them. She came back, but they slowly started to realize that it was in a demonic form and wasn't really their daughter. The doll ends up attacking and killing the people who own the home. The doll is then taken by a priest and everybody makes it out. Problem is, the little girl with polio who was possessed is nowhere to be seen. We then cut to her going to an orphanage and being adopted by a family, and going by the name Annabelle, who was the name of the little girl, the daughter who died. Turns out that little girl Annabelle, or the polio girl I should call her, was the girl from the very first Annabelle movie who came back and killed her parents, so we have a nice little tie-in there. I came into this movie thinking that it would suck really badly, and that I'd hate it, and was left a bit surprised. I genuinely liked this movie for the horror that it does. I don't know how I'd rate it. I did like the scares, and, well, mostly the scares, a lot more than The Conjuring 2, though, which is why I'm putting it higher on the list. The Conjuring 2 had much better writing and a much better story, but I hate The Nun, and that pisses me off, so it got thrown into third place. Nun. In comes Annabelle Creation, by far the best Annabelle movie, and I was left kind of shocked that an Annabelle movie would be something that I liked. I didn't necessarily like this movie. I kind of hated it, and some of the jump scares were really dumb. It was a pretty freaky movie, so hell yeah, scary movies. It's usually not what I look for in a horror film, is just for something to be scary, but it's definitely an addition that I like. I like horror, I like scary, but I also really like story and characters, and this movie doesn't do that very well. I find it nice to be able to happen upon a movie that actually gives me chills and freaks me out a little bit. It doesn't happen very often anymore, so good job, director man. This leads us to our number one spot, the best movie in the Conjuring universe. The movie that started it all. With James Wan as the director, you'd think it would be just another bad haunted house horror movie by James Wan after the Insidious movie and whatever else he's worked on. But no, it's a bit better than that. Our number one slot is The Conjuring, and The Conjuring is actually a pretty good horror movie. The ending is very dumb, but I like this movie. I've seen it a few times by now. I wouldn't go around recommending it to people because everybody knows about The Conjuring. It's a very successful movie that spawned an incredibly successful franchise, earning over $2 billion, as I said somehow, mostly due to the Nun movies. I don't know how you did that, but go on. The Conjuring, of course, builds this whole universe in which they're going to look at all these cases of spooky things that the Warrens had happen throughout their career. We get some explanation into who the Warrens are throughout the beginning of this movie, and even run into our little Annabelle doll. We then meet a family, which this movie centers, the Perrin family, and their little haunted house, the Conjuring house. We get some haunted house tropes, like the dog not wanting to enter the house. Ooh, spooky. I wonder what's in there. So the parents get this house pretty cheap on the market and think nothing of it. But while moving in, they find a dark, damp, moist, musty basement that was sealed off. Very spooky. I wonder if this will play into any scares later on in the movie. The first act of this film is, well, if you subtract the Annabelle part and the Warren part, is just inoffensive horror movie stuff. Some of the family members are experiencing some pretty freaky things. Very slow build up. The mom believes that there's something spooky happening. The dad isn't quite sold. This all builds until the father has to go. I think he's like a truck driver or something, so he has to leave and stay away from home for a night. And that's where really goes down. Really everything hits the fan here. The daughters are all experiencing some crazy wacky stuff, while the mom gets locked into the basement.
Who's ever down there? I'm gonna lock you in now!
Wanna play hide and clap?
It's just kind of James Wan shit that he's done forever and will continue to do until he gets old and doesn't want to direct movies or figures out a new process, I guess. Just when things kind of hit their plateau, the dad comes home and pretty much saves everyone. The family decides to call in a priest and the Warrens, I think. Maybe it's the Warrens that get called in to prove whether or not there's a demon in the house so they can get an exorcism done by the Catholic Church. This is actually where the movie sort of falls off a bit for me. There are interesting moments while the Warrens are there trying to prove that this place is haunted that I don't necessarily dislike. But it's after that where the climax of the movie happens and they're trying to exorcise the mom, where this movie completely falls off a cliff. The whole scene of the exorcism, like her randomly falling through this area, going all the way down in the basement and somehow not having a scratch on her, and then her acting like a demon, being all freaky, don't do it for me. Just people flying around and doing crazy just don't have an effect. Maybe I've seen too many movies like this, but I do not like it.
Leave my wife alone, god damn it! Let her go! Do you hear me?
Dad,
Let her go!
Obi speratem est.
She's already gone, and now you're all gonna die.
So I think that this movie has two solid, like really solid, like the first and second act of the film, but this last bit, like just the exorcism and all that, really drag it down to the depths of hell. If shaking your head, like no, like oh god, were an emotion, this movie captures it in the end. But yeah, it falls into my usual gripes of being flung around and people flying around that I think suck. I guess it is a decent ending, and it does have a really good lead up. I guess it could only end one way. I just wish they wouldn't have made this exorcism so exorcism-y. Just hearing somebody pray while holding a book and a cross while another person's like freaking out and doing all this shit, just it's so overplayed and overdone that I'm sick of it. If I could never watch another possession and exorcism film in my entire life, I would gladly do it. In the next video I do, I cannot pick another movie that has anything to do with exorcism because I am done. I didn't really dislike it that much when I first watched it again, though. I just definitely noted down how bad this movie ends, especially with a lead up that was just kind of scary and pretty well done. Other than the average, like, door opening on its own that James Wan really likes to do. Not too bad. I bet there were a lot of screams in the theater when that woman jumps off of that wardrobe, though. I bet that really got some people. It's probably been 10 years since I first watched this movie that I watched it again now, and not too bad overall. Not too bad overall. It made the #1 spot kind of because it's the first movie to start it all, which is why I had to put it up higher than The Conjuring 2. And the ending is better than The Conjuring 2, even though I bitched a lot about this ending. I do like how it set things up. I think that one thing that The Conjuring 2 has over this movie is Patrick Wilson, the guy that plays Ed Warren in these movies, does such a great job at being comedic relief and just being entertaining in that second movie, but still in this movie, his character's one of the better characters. I just think he's probably the best actor in these, and all of these films. He's probably the best actor. I also should mention that even though the ending was really bad and stupid, I did find it funny, and that was entertaining. Overall, my throat is sore, I'm getting sick, and this has been a long recording process that's taken me 2 hours. That was the Conjuring universe. Overall, it sucks. I will admit that. Starting from Annabelle Comes Home and heading down, the final 4 movies on my list are not bad horror films, and I didn't have a bad time watching them. The problem is there's 4 really bad movies in this franchise. I don't like this franchise in totality. I hope that they do better with the next The Conjuring movie, though, and James Wan returns to the helm of these films. I don't know if I'm going to entirely keep up with this franchise, and I do sort of hope the Conjuring universe would come to an end. But reviewing my list, at number 8, we have The Nun, quite possibly one of the worst movies I've ever watched in my entire life. By the way, if you want to entertain yourself and laugh, go through on The Nun's IMDb page and read the reviews that are 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, and read what they have to say, because that is some crazy to think that this movie is a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. I don't know what you're smoking, but if you give this movie any higher than a 2, it's something good. Then we head in, speaking of 2, The Nun 2, a sequel to a movie. Holy I wish I never watched these movies. Was this video worth the pain and suffering I endured to watch The Nuns? I don't know. I hope. By the way, if you're still watching this and you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be really appreciated, because I had to put up with whatever The Nun is. I think just because I watched The Nun, I should get at least 1 whole like for that. I'm at 900 subscribers or around there. Need 100 more to hit 1,000, so anybody who subscribes to the channel and wants to see more is greatly appreciated. Coming in at number 6, we have The Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do It, a movie with a whole storyline about stopping a witch from cursing this guy that didn't need to happen. All in all, boring movie, no horror, shouldn't have been done. Coming in at number 5, Annabelle. The worst Annabelle movie. This movie sucked. It was slow. It was very long. I didn't really care by the end. The ending was dumb, as so many of these movies are. I don't want to talk about Annabelle. Moving on to number 4, we have our first exciting little movie in the franchise. Kind of ended the terrible phase of watching an Annabelle movie, a Nun movie, and an Annabelle movie, all one after the other. Annabelle Comes Home. Dumb, silly, funny, entertaining, kind of scary sometimes. Overall, not too bad. I liked Annabelle Comes Home. Then, hitting the top 3, we have The Conjuring 2. England in it, a little spooky in it. That's all I have to say. A little spooky in it. Going in at our number 2 spot, Annabelle Creation, the scariest movie in the franchise, in my humble opinion. Humble. I'm the best. They managed to make Annabelle scary. The director of this movie does horror really well. A fun little tie-in, a fun prequel to explain where Annabelle came from. All in all, not too bad. A pretty horrific movie, if you will. And our number 1 spot, The Conjuring. There's nothing I can really say about The Conjuring that hasn't been said. This movie is very, very, very popular and very huge. It created a giant franchise, as I've said. So, my bad. Universe. I went into these movies and this video wondering if my preconceived notions about the Conjuring universe were worthy. Like, I wanted to test that and see if these movies were as bad as I assumed they were, and I was left a bit in the middle. Yes, some of them are even worse than I thought that they were, and others kind of surprised me. I don't know too much about other horror franchises off the top of my head to say where this one would rank amongst them. I don't regret watching all of these movies. The Nuns definitely me up, though. If you take those out of this cinematic universe, I think you're left with something that's not too bad. Sure, Annabelle's stupid, but Annabelle Creation's a pretty scary movie, so why not? I had a lot of fun watching some of these movies, though, and I hope you enjoyed the video. It took me quite a while to watch these movies and write down and think about how I was going to cover these while trying to summarize them quickly enough. I didn't want this video to be too long, so I hope you enjoyed it. As I said earlier, please subscribe. I just had to endure the Nun. Not really. But if you do want to see more, then subscribe down below and let me know what you want to see next. I just told myself after the last one that I wasn't going to cover a big franchise, and look what I did. Why do I keep doing it to myself? Anyway, if I haven't said it, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, drop me a like and sub to the channel. Let me know what you want to see next down below, and I'll see you in the next video.